Hey guys, hope you're all doing well. This is the second video in my favorite albums of every year. So last video we did the 1960s. This will be the 1970s, which is pretty easily my favorite decade of music. If I had to only listen to one decade, I'd probably pick the 70s. Like I said in the last video, though, there's no disco, so don't click away just yet. Don't knock disco just yet. Just give it the benefit of the doubt. But this is all rock. This is all rock in this video. Some of the greatest musicians, I think, some of my favorite musicians emerged in the 70s. So without any further ado, let's get right to it. So if you watched my last installment, which was my favorite albums from 1960 to 1969, you know that 70% of it was dominated by one band, of course, the Beatles. So you're thinking, oh, we're out of the 60s. We're done with the Beatles. Wrong. No, it's not Let It Be. George Harrison, All Things Must Pass. This, not just my favorite record of 1970, it's probably one of my top 3 favorite albums of all time. This is where George really showed. He was like, John and Paul, I love John and Paul, but he was like, I don't need you guys. I can make my own great music. And, Let It Be was another option for 1970. But I feel, I couldn't count out All Things Must Pass. I mean, I'd Have You Anytime, My Sweet Lord, Wah Wah, Isn't It a Pity, What Is Life? Just like I could name, there's like 30 of these. I could name every single one of them. But I won't. Run of the Mill, one of my favorite songs, kind of forgotten about, not really talked about much. This, unfortunately, I know you're probably wondering, did not come with a poster. Very sad. Many of them don't. This is just all things, the title track. This was George's. I don't even know what to say about it. I just love this album so much. This is George's. He's telling a story. And this box set was really hard to find, all in one piece. Like I was saying, too bad there's no poster, but they're all here. And I mean, Ringo played on this. Klaus Vormann, who I mentioned in the last video, designed the Rubber Soul album cover. Eric Clapton. I mean, guys from Badfinger. So many great. I believe Derek and the Dominoes was formed out of the sessions for this album, and I'm pretty sure I accidentally just ripped this a little bit. That's too bad. But if you haven't listened to it, it's a long listen. I believe it's over 100 minutes long. But it's an amazing album. George Harrison, All Things Must Pass, one of my favorite albums of all time. So the early 70s were sometimes a little bit harder for me to choose because this was post-Beatles, but pre when my favorite acts started coming out. So this one was a little bit harder, but I have to thank my buddy Bill Burke. So Bill, if you're watching, thank you for introducing me to this artist and this album. John Prine, self-titled album from 1971. There's things in here like Sam Stone, Far From Me, 6 O'Clock News. I mean, if you like, this is very folksy, very Southern country. A lot of great storytelling and very clever and witty lyrics if you're into that sort of thing. But yeah, John Prine, he recently passed away. I believe was one of the first musicians to die of COVID back in early 2020. And, people just, saying the nicest things about him. And he's just got some good, this is a great album to just listen start to finish. I don't know if I could tell you all the words to most of these songs, but it's just one of those albums you put it on start to finish, side A, flip it, side B, and then it just all blends together really, really well. And he's kind of got this Dylan-esque style to him a little bit, of his singing and playing style. This is just a really good album. Even if you're not a huge fan of classic country and that sort of thing, give it a shot. Listen to some of the songs, but I put it on my list, so it's got to be a little bit good, right? John Prine, self-titled, debut 1971. Okay, 1972. This is a more recent band, not a recent band, but an album and a band that I discovered more recently. My first exposure to this band was hearing a cover of one of their songs on one of my favorite TV shows as a kid, appropriately, That 70s Show. But this is the cult classic, much beloved #1 record by Big Star. And no, this is a repress. Don't get too excited. It's not one of the originals. This is a really good album. Feel is really good. In the Street, I mentioned, is that 70s song that was done by somebody else, and then Cheap Trick for the rest of the duration of that 70s show. The Ballad of El Goodo, I really love that song. This is just, I'm a lot more familiar with the first side, but the second side is amazing too. This is just a cult classic. This is, Big Star was kind of a doomed band from the start. They didn't really have any commercial success. They kind of had this, I keep saying the word cult, but cult following kind of later on afterwards. Their guitarist, Chris Bell, one of the members of the 27 Club, obviously not talked about as much as Morrison or Cobain or Hendrix. But he was a great musician. He could have done so much more if he had lived. I believe he died in a car crash at the age of 27. But this and their follow-up, Radio City, I like this album a lot more. But if you haven't heard of Big Star, I would recommend listening to this album, of course, but also watching their movie. It's a documentary. I believe it's called Big Star, Nothing Can Hurt Me, Nothing Can Stop Me, something like that. Just Big Star documentary, you'll find it. 1972, Big Star, #1 record. For 1973, I had a little bit of trouble initially deciding which one to pick, because it was still in that period, like I mentioned, post-Beatles and these other bands I really liked in the late 70s. So there's still quite a few years in there. I wasn't really sure what to do, but in the last year or so, I've discovered another artist who's been around for a long time, but who I hadn't really ever listened to all that much. I knew about him, but never really gave his music a shot because I was never really much for the singer-songwriter acoustic guitar style until my band Dirty Red Hearts. That was kind of the that's kind of the stuff we do. For me, unintentionally, but the sitting and playing, telling a story with an acoustic guitar has really grown on me as I've matured a bit. So 1973, For Every Man by Jackson Browne. This also is one of the greatest album covers of all time, because if you pull out the inner sleeve, see he's right there, but when you pull him out, he's gone. Magic, right? It's amazing. I'm not a huge Eagles fan. I'll put that out there right now. Say what you will, but please go easy on me. This is Take It Easy. I obviously have your own opinion, have your own preference, but this to me is Take It Easy. Jackson Browne helped write the song, or maybe he wrote it by himself. I don't remember. Take It Easy. The way he does it, I favor. He's got some funny songs in here like Redneck Friend. The Times You've Come is one of my favorites too, because he does a duet with, oh gosh, who is it? Is it Linda Ronstadt? No, Bonnie Raitt, I think. I believe it's Bonnie Raitt that he does the duet with. And if you follow any of my other channels, I was in my high school band, Mr. P and the Green Wave. My favorite lead singer of all time, Mary Babb from that band, sounds just like Bonnie Raitt on this recording. The So I've always had I've always had a bit of a special connection to that song. And this is just the chillest album. It's just you sit back and listen to it, and you just get lost in it. Some of the songs blend into each other, which I always love with albums. The ones that you just moves from one song to the next seamlessly. This is just a great album. Yeah, there's just, and the final title song for Every Man that finishes the album off. It's great. Yeah, Jackson Browne for Every Man, 1973. 1974. Okay. I There's a certain band that's going to emerge this year that I'm not sure how a lot of people feel about. You either love them or you hate them. But in March 2019, I was fortunate enough to see them in concert. And anyone who doesn't like this band, anyone who says that this band should not have been inducted to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, has not been to one of these shows where I got this shirt. 1974, Kiss by Kiss. Is it their greatest album? No. Unfortunately, they came a little early, so some of their earlier albums that weren't as great, in my opinion, were chosen. But then you get to like 76 and 77 when some of my other favorite artists started coming out, and Kiss, their better albums like Rock and Roll Over and Destroyer kind of got pushed a little bit off to the side. But they did show up on my list a couple times. Strutter, that's an amazing song to kick off a band. We got things like where's the list here? Oh, Firehouse, Cold Gin, Ace Frehley wrote. The second side isn't as great. You got some things in there like Kiss in Time and Love Theme from Kiss that are just kind of meh, and then you get to Black Diamond at the end, and I mean, come on. That's an amazing song. Starts out with Peter Criss singing, then Paul Stanley comes in. And I mean, yeah, of course, say what you want about Kiss. Paul Stanley, one of the greatest lead vocalists of all time. He's still got it. I heard, like I said, I went and saw them 3 years ago. He's still got it. He can still sing. This obviously didn't happen in the 70s, but since I'm talking about people who don't like Kiss, and for even the people that do like Kiss, please be nice to Eric and Tommy. Just throwing that out there. Ace and Peter are gone. I love them as much as you did, but they're not in the band anymore. Eric and Tommy are doing a great job. But yeah, 1974, Kiss's self-titled debut. Like I said, not one of their best. I believe Ace spray painted his hair and then it wouldn't come out. That's kind of a fun story. That's probably partially why I chose this one. But yeah, give it a listen. It's a good, solid album. So 1975, before we move on to 1975, I want to say that in the last part, I mentioned 1974. I wanted to correct myself with Black Diamond, that it starts out with Peter, then moves to Paul. It's the other way around. Paul Stanley starts the song, and then Peter Criss comes in. Just wanted to clear that up. And while we're on the topic of Kiss, 1975, Dress to Kill. This is one of my favorite album covers of theirs. If you have it on vinyl, the Kiss All Around the Borders is embossed. Very fun. Love the outfits. Again, is this one of their greatest albums? No. But in terms of 1975 and what I really liked, this was an easy choice for me. Room Service, that's a funny song. Getaways is a solid song. Rock Bottom, one of my favorite songs to play on acoustic, especially 12-string acoustic. Come On and Love Me, Anything for My Baby, She. If you've never heard the original version of She, back when the band was still Wicked Lester, that's if you like the Kiss version, that's a very interesting version to listen to because it's very jazzy and weird, but I like it. It's not the same, but it's different. Love Her All I Can as one of my favorite guitar and drum solos. That bam, bam, yeah, just great, great stuff from Peter Criss and Ace Frehley on guitar. And then it ends with Rock and Roll All Night. I mean, everybody loves the version from Alive. I get it that there's more energy and stuff in a live recording, but I don't discount the the studio performances, especially of Rock and Roll All Night, the band, the song that really gave the band some playtime. But yeah, Kiss, Dressed to Kill. This is a great album, 1975. Give it a listen. Okay, so 1976 saw the emergence of my favorite artist and band of all time. And yet this album almost didn't make it. Before I unveil this album, I want to give... I'll be doing this a couple times for the albums that went head-to-head with another one. I'll be giving an honorable mention to the one that just barely lost out, but I did a ranking point system. I put all songs up against all the other songs and ranked them and then gave them all points. It's this whole complex thing that I like to do in my free time, apparently. So the album that lost out was Run with the Pack by Bad Company. That was one of the first records I ever got. My friend Colin gave me a copy of Run with the Pack back when I had probably 2-3 records, because he was a record collector before I was, and he gave me that one. And since I didn't have very many at the time, I would play the same ones over and over again, and Run with the Pack was one of those. That's just such an amazing album. Silver, Blue, and Gold, the title song. Off the top of my head, I'm, under the pressure. I can't really think of all the other songs, but on top of the one I'm about to show you, listen to Run with the Pack. It just barely lost out to the debut of my favorite artist of all time, Tom Petty. Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers debut album from 1976. It's got Breakdown. It's got American Girl. There's a couple songs on there that, kind of get forgotten about, but I mean, it's Tom Petty. I mean, if you're a fan of my channel, if you watch my channel, you obviously know how much I love Tom Petty. That's probably why you're subscribed and watching, is because you found me because I was doing a Tom Petty cover. Thank you, by the way. Very much appreciated. Fooled Again, Hometown Blues, The Wild One Forever, anything that's rock and roll. There's a lot of songs on here, like I said, that get forgotten about, but there's so many really good ones on here too. And the back cover is great. They all have crazy mustaches. Especially, I've talked to Ben Montench before on Instagram. Very nice guy. Very cool cat, as he would say. He's so much fun. He'll give me I'll ask questions about the band, and he'll answer all my questions about Tom and the early days and some of the undocumented stuff. I love Tom Petty. He's going to show up a lot. He's going to knock out a lot of albums that you might think about for certain years. But I mean, it's so hard for me to pick against Tom Petty, because when I listen to a band, I gotta love everybody's personalities. I gotta really like who I'm listening to, not just what I'm listening to. Which is probably another reason why I love Kiss so much, because they're all, obviously these exaggerated personalities and characters. But I really like having that ability to relate to a band. And it's just, I can't bet against Tom Petty. It's just, this is a great album. I was a little bit annoyed with myself that I almost chose against it, because this was I was like, 1976, Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers, easy. And then I started looking at what else was out there, and I was like, oh yeah, Run with the Pack. I think Blondie had some good stuff in 76. I don't remember which one it was, or maybe not. No, they kind of came out in 70. Parallel Lines was 78, but 76 has Rumors might have been 76 by Fleetwood Mac. Maybe that was 77 or 78. I don't know. I start to, I know this stuff, but when the camera's rolling, I lose all focus. Breakdown, American Girl. I mean, Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers. Amazing album. 1977. So just like in 76, we're going to have another honorable mention. But this time, I didn't feel too bad about kicking one of these albums out, because they're by the same band. So if you want to take a guess before I tell you, some hints. Their first album that came out in towards the beginning of 77, very dark and heavy, kind of scary. And then the second one that came out a couple months later, still in 77, very poppy, power pop, some great stuff on that album. These two had to go head to head because I could not choose. It's apples to oranges, day and night, the difference between these two albums. If you're a diehard fan, if you've listened from the beginning and you got that first album and you're like, this is so good, this stuff's so heavy and scary and crazy, and then you get the next one and you're like, what is this? Like, is this the same band? So the honorable mention is Cheap Trick In Color. That was on the list for the longest time. And, I had it on my list and I was like, this is, I feel really good about this pick. There's so many great songs on that album. I Want You to Want Me. People don't like that version as much. People always go for the Budokan version. But I love the studio version too, the poppiness and the piano part and stuff I love. Southern Girls, one of my favorite Cheap Trick songs, is on that album too. But I ran the test. I put all the songs up against each other, and by a very, very low margin, Cheap Trick's debut album, Cheap Trick from 1977, won out just barely. I want to settle the debate right now. There's a lot of controversy around this album about the two sides and which order it should be in. I can't say one way or another. There's only 4 guys I would really listen to that gave me an answer about what order this album's supposed to be in. But in my opinion, Hot Love begins side 1 and Hello Kitties begins side 2. The funny story about this and what causes that confusion, if you're not familiar, is that they call the first side Side A and the second side Side 1. And they did that because they claimed to not have any B-side songs. All these songs were worthy of being on the A side. And, I probably couldn't pull out a lot of songs from this album that I think were, worthy of noting that a lot of people know about. I mean, people talk about Hello Kitties. That's not one of my favorites. He's a Whore, those kind of things. I really like those songs. I tend to turn to like Mandocello, The Ballad of TV Violence, Daddy Should Have Stayed in High School, and Taxman. Those are great songs. And I think, the reason I could pull out so many from In Color was because there was a lot more iconic songs on that, or more, different, more enjoyable songs. But this as a full album, this is heavy, this is angry. But this is a great album. Cheap Trick, influenced by Kiss and the Beatles, so you can't really go wrong there, in my opinion. Got to see them last year. They put on a great show. I don't think they played, they might have played Hot Love. But definitely listen to this album and In Color. 1977 was a good year for Cheap Trick. Lots of great albums came out in 1978, but there's one that just prevails in my mind. Yes, there was a Tom Petty record that came out, and it was put up for consideration. But this is one of the few Tom Petty records that didn't make it into the list. So it wasn't really up for consideration, as in I think it would win. But I just got to give a shout out to You're Gonna Get It, Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers. But off the same vein as what we just talked about, Cheap Trick, Heaven Tonight, great album. Starts with Surrender. Again, people probably primarily listen to Budokan the most. California Man, Auf Wiedersehen, Heaven Tonight. I love that song. It's so dark and creepy. Stiff Competition, How Are You? There's just so many great songs on this album. Funny thing is, as a younger fellow, I never really was all that interested in Cheap Trick if I saw them at the record store. Because I thought they were a duo, and that's probably their own fault because they always put Robin and Tom on the front, and then Bunny and Rick on the back. I always would look at the records and be like, oh, it's just a duo. I was kind of like, oh, I don't really like Hall and Oates or that kind of thing. I thought they were just like some pop duo or like Wham. I don't know what I thought. I just thought they were a duo. I didn't know they were a Beatles inspired power pop, rock band that I would fall in love with. But yeah, this is an amazing album. The self-titled Surrender, of course, probably my favorite song, which is easy to say, but the hits are the hits for a reason. Yeah, it's just a great album for me to discover as when I was a teenager. Yeah, 1978, Heaven Tonight by Cheap Trick. Amazing album. So we're coming to the end of another video here. Again, I want to thank you for sticking to the end and watching this. I really appreciate it. I hope you like my picks, and hopefully you're getting some good music recommendations. I mean, I'm not really pulling anything out of oblivion here or picking any albums that are, nobody's heard of, but still, I do this for myself. I pick these albums. I love ranking things. I love, picking things from different eras and whatever. It's weird. I don't know why I do it, but I do. I also have a list of my favorite movies from every year dating back to like 55. I love movies too. So if you're ever interested in that, maybe, let me know in the comments. But while we're focusing on music, you're probably a Tom Petty fan like I am if you're here. 1979. It was actually mentioned on Jeopardy the other night, this album. And, it'll be a while ago when this was released, but it was something about Southern Rocker was got the name of this album from some naval commander someone had said. I don't remember it exactly, but it was mid-June. Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers, Damn the Torpedoes. Easy. I mean, this man is the reason I own a Rickenbacker. Like, there's so many things that I love about Tom Petty. He's going to get a lot of mentions. I'm going to talk about him a lot. If you thought I talked about George Harrison a lot, I'm going to talk about Tom Petty probably even more. I mean, I love him. If you watch the channel, you know I love Tom Petty. Refugee, Here Comes My Girl, Even the Losers, Don't Do Me Like That. I mean, there's, probably 5, or what are there, 9 songs in this album? Probably 5 that were just instant classics. And a couple more that were, kind of, not as well known, but I always say when I write my own songs, try to write something as good as Tom Petty's least popular song. Because I've listened to everything of his, the deep cuts, everything, like all the stuff they did on his Sirius XM channel, like all those hidden deep cuts and tracks and whatnot. I mean, everything that man ever touched was golden in my opinion. But this is just such an amazing album. The drumming is perfect. This was all done at Sound City was it Sound City? Sound Studios? Sound City, I believe, in Los Angeles. Oh, it probably says on here, doesn't it? Probably says, but I'm not going to waste your time while I look for it. I believe it's Sound City. If you've ever watched that documentary, or if you haven't, you should. And if you have, watch it again, because I have watched it a couple times. Jimmy Iovine, of course, amazing producer. Tom Petty would listen to these songs on the radio. Of course, if you haven't watched Running Down a Dream, Tom's 4-hour documentary, I've watched that a couple times too. He talks about this album a lot, and just the story and like his battle with MCA Records was amazing, and just all the kind of stuff he did with that lawsuit and just how he came out and prevailed was amazing. But yeah, Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers, Damn the Torpedoes, 1979. All right, we are coming to the end of this video. Again, I want to thank you very much for watching. Another thing too is I will put down in the description a slideshow, PowerPoint, Google thing of all of the albums and their tracks. We talked about the 60s in the last video, the 70s here, and so of course, naturally, we'll be moving on to the 80s in the next video. I got plenty of albums for that decade, another decade of amazing music. Probably second favorite would be the 80s, if we didn't talk about the Beatles, just overall different bands, the 80s right up there with the 70s of great music. A lot of fun choices I had to make, and I hope you will stick around, and please subscribe if you don't want to miss anything, but don't feel like you have to. It is much appreciated, and it is free. But yeah, the 80s video will be coming out soon, and I hope you enjoyed this one.